They say some houses remember. They hold on to the laughter, the tears, the screams that once echoed through their halls. But the Whitmore Mansion didn't just remember. It refused to let go. For 40 years it stood behind rusted gates on the outskirts of Ashford, Connecticut, a towering monument to tragedy that locals whispered about but never approached. Children dared each other to touch its fence. Teenagers swore they saw lights flickering in windows that had been dark for decades. And the old-timers, the ones who remembered the night everything changed, they just shook their heads and looked away. But in the autumn of 2024, when the last living Whitmore heir finally died and the estate went up for auction, 3 strangers would walk through those gates seeking answers to questions they didn't even know they were asking. What they found inside would change everything they believed about love, loss, and the price we pay for the secrets we keep. This is the story of how a house full of ghosts became a place of healing, and how sometimes the most cursed places hold the keys to our salvation. The gathering, the September rain fell like a curtain over Ashford, turning the unpaved road to the Whitmore estate into a ribbon of mud and memory. Sarah Chen sat in her rented sedan, windshield wipers beating a nervous rhythm as she stared up at the mansion for the first time. Even through the downpour, it was magnificent. A 3-story Victorian Gothic masterpiece with towers that clawed at the gray sky, wraparound porches that sagged under the weight of abandonment, and windows, so many windows, all dark and watching like dead eyes. She was 32 years old, a documentary filmmaker from Seattle, whose last 3 projects had barely broken even, and she was here chasing a story that everyone told her didn't exist. Her grandmother had worked at this mansion in the early 1980s, right before it was abandoned. Before she died last year, her grandmother had gripped Sarah's hand with surprising strength and whispered, "The truth is still in that house. Someone needs to find it. Promise me." Sarah had promised even though she didn't understand, even though it made no sense. Her grandmother had never talked about her time at the Whitmore estate, not once in all those years. Now, watching the rain batter the decaying structure, Sarah felt a familiar cocktail of excitement and dread. This was what she did. Dug into stories other people wanted to forget, gave voice to the silenced, brought light to darkness. But something about this felt different, personal, dangerous in a way she couldn't quite name. A knock on her window made her jump. A man stood in the rain, mid-40s perhaps, with salt and pepper hair plastered to his forehead and eyes that held a deep, worn-out sadness. He wore an expensive suit that was getting ruined by the weather and carried a leather briefcase like a shield. Sarah rolled down her window. "Can I help you? Are you here for the Whitmore estate?" His voice was hoarse, like he'd been shouting or crying, maybe both. "I'm making a documentary about it. Sarah Chen." She extended her hand. He stared at it for a moment before shaking it. His grip was cold and slightly trembling. "Marcus Whitmore. I'm the attorney handling the estate. Also the great-nephew of Richard Whitmore, who owned this place until everything fell apart." Sarah's heart kicked into a higher gear. A Whitmore, an actual family member. "I'd love to interview you. The family perspective would be invaluable." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The family perspective?" "The family perspective is that this place destroyed everyone who ever loved it, and now I'm the last one left to clean up the mess. You want to make a documentary? Fine, but you should know what you're walking into. This isn't just some abandoned mansion with a colorful history. People died here, disappeared, went insane, and nobody has ever been able to explain why." Before Sarah could respond, a 3rd vehicle pulled up, a beat-up pickup truck that looked like it had survived several apocalypses. The driver who stepped out was younger, maybe 27 or 28, with a tangle of dark curls and hands stained with paint. He looked at the mansion like someone seeing an old enemy. "You the lawyer?" he called to Marcus through the rain. "Marcus Whitmore. And you are?" "Jamie Ortega. I'm the restoration specialist your office hired. Though I gotta say, when they said this place was in rough shape, I didn't expect it to look like the set of a horror movie." Sarah got out of her car, immediately regretting it as rain soaked through her jacket. "You're going to restore this place?" Jamie shrugged. "That's the plan. Apparently some tech billionaire wants to turn it into a luxury hotel, because what the world needs is more rich people sleeping in cursed mansions." He pulled out a cigarette, struggled to light it in the rain, gave up. "You With the estate, documentary filmmaker, I'm here to uncover the history of the house. Great. So we've got a lawyer who looks like he's attending his own funeral, a filmmaker chasing ghosts, and a contractor stupid enough to take a job nobody else would touch. This is going to end well. Marcus didn't smile. The keys are in my car. We should get inside before we drown out here, but I need to tell you both something first. He turned to face them fully, and in that moment Sarah saw genuine fear in his eyes. I've been the Whitmore family attorney for 15 years. I've handled divorces, bankruptcies, criminal cases, you name it, but I've avoided this place like it was radioactive. Do you know why? Neither Sarah nor Jamie answered. Because everyone who's tried to deal with this property has had something terrible happen to them. The real estate agent who first listed it, car accident, paralyzed from the waist down. The historical society president who wanted to preserve it, massive stroke at 43. The journalist who wrote an exposé, she disappeared. Just vanished one day, never found. I could go on, but you get the idea. So why are you here now? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus's face crumpled slightly. Because my daughter is sick. Leukemia. The treatments are experimental, expensive, and insurance won't cover it. The estate is worth millions even in this condition. I need the commission from this sale to save her life. So here I am, making a deal with whatever devil lives in this place. The rain seemed to fall harder, and for a moment, none of them spoke. Sarah thought about her grandmother's dying wish. Jamie stared at the house with something like recognition in his eyes. And Marcus just stood there, a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. Well, Jamie finally said, we're all here for our reasons. Might as well see what we're dealing with. They gathered at Marcus's car, and he retrieved a large iron key that looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. As they walked toward the mansion, Sarah noticed the gate. Wrought iron twisted into shapes that might have been flowers or might have been screaming faces. It was hard to tell under decades of rust and ivy. The gates have been locked since 1984, Marcus said, fitting the key into a massive padlock. The night of the incident. After the police finished their investigation, my great-uncle Richard locked everything up and never came back. He died in a nursing home 3 years later, completely mute, didn't speak a single word after that night. The padlock opened with a sound like breaking bones. The gates swung inward on their own, and Sarah told herself it was just the wind, just the slope of the driveway, just physics and nothing more. But the way Jamie tensed beside her suggested he was having similar doubts. The driveway curved through what had once been magnificent gardens. Now it was a jungle of overgrown roses, their thorns thick as fingers, and trees that had grown wild and grasping. Through breaks in the foliage, Sarah caught glimpses of stone statues, angels mostly, though time and weather had eroded their features into something more sinister. What exactly happened here in 1984? Sarah asked, her journalist instincts kicking in. I've found surprisingly little documentation. Marcus's jaw tightened. Because the family paid a lot of money to keep it quiet. But you'll find out anyway if you're digging, so I might as well tell you. There was a party. The Whitmores threw a Halloween masquerade ball, which was their tradition. Hundreds of guests, the finest society from all over New England. But by midnight, something had gone terribly wrong. They had reached the front steps now, massive slabs of stone leading up to double doors that must have been 12 feet tall. Sarah's camera hand itched to start filming, but she forced herself to just listen. The details are confused, Marcus continued, but witnesses reported screaming from the 3rd floor. When people went to investigate, they found Victoria Whitmore, Richard's wife, standing in the ballroom covered in blood. She was laughing and crying at the same time, holding a straight razor. Around her were... He paused, swallowed hard. 7 bodies, 7 people, all in costume, all dead. Cut throats, mostly. It was carnage. Jamie whistled low. Jesus Christ! Victoria kept saying it wasn't her. Said the house made her do it. Said there was something in the walls, something that whispered. The courts ruled her insane, sent her to a psychiatric facility. She died there 6 months later. Threw herself out a window. Marcus fitted another key into the front door locks. The victims' families were paid settlements so large they agreed to never speak publicly about what happened. And the Whitmore family just pretended this place didn't exist. Sarah's mind was racing, but there has to be more to it. People don't just suddenly commit mass murder because a house tells them to. You'd think, Marcus said. But Victoria Whitmore was by all accounts akin. Gentlewoman. Devoted mother, philanthropist, never so much as a speeding ticket. And yet, he turned the key, and the door began to open with a groan that sounded almost alive. Well, see for yourself. The smell hit them first. Not decay exactly, though there was an undercurrent of that. It was more like old air, stale time, and underneath it all, something sweet and wrong, like flowers rotting in a closed room. Sarah's stomach turned, but she forced herself forward. The entrance hall was vast, with a grand staircase that split into two curved wings leading to the second floor. Dust covered everything in a thick gray blanket, disturbed only by the tracks of small animals and the occasional collapse of ceiling plaster. A massive chandelier hung overhead, its crystals dulled but still catching what little light filtered through the filthy windows. The walls were covered in portraits, Whitmore ancestors staring down with expressions that ranged from stern to sorrowful. "Welcome to my family legacy," Marcus said bitterly. Jamie was already moving through the space with the contractors, pulling out a tablet to take notes. Structure looks surprisingly solid, actually. These old houses were built to last. We'll need to check for rot, obviously, and God knows what the plumbing and electrical situations are, but the bones seem good. Sarah was focused on something else. On the far wall, barely visible under the dust, was a large painting. She moved closer, wiping away grime with her sleeve. It showed a family portrait. A man, woman, and 3 children, all dressed in formal Victorian attire. But someone had scratched deep gouges through the canvas, specifically through the faces, obliterating their features. "Who did this?" she asked. Marcus came to stand beside her. "We don't know. It was like this when the police investigated. That's Richard and Victoria with their children. All the family portraits in the house were damaged the same way, like someone wanted to erase them." A sound from above made them all freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the second-floor hallway. "Probably just the house settling," Jamie said, but his voice was uncertain. "Houses don't settle in footstep patterns," Sarah whispered. Marcus had gone pale. "We should stay together. Nobody goes off alone." Agreed? They nodded, but Sarah was already wondering if she'd be able to keep that promise. Her grandmother had told her the truth was in this house. She couldn't find it by sticking to the group. They spent the next hour exploring the first floor, the dining room with its table still set for a dinner that was never eaten, the china dusty but unbroken, the library with thousands of books slowly decomposing in the damp air, the kitchen where copper pots hung like sleeping bats and something had nested in the old stove. But it was the ballroom that stopped them cold. It took up the entire eastern wing of the first floor, a vast space with parquet floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that must have offered stunning views of the gardens when they weren't covered in grime and vines. The ceiling was painted with elaborate frescoes of celestial scenes, angels and demons locked in eternal battle. And there, in the center of the room, still visible even under 4 decades of dust, were the stains. Dark brown patches spread across the floor in patterns that were unmistakably human-shaped, 7 of them arranged in a rough circle. "This is where it happened," Marcus said unnecessarily, "where my great-aunt murdered 7 people while 100 witnesses were locked out of the room, because somehow, impossibly, every door to the ballroom had been locked from the inside. The police could never explain it." Sarah's hands were shaking as she pulled out her camera. This was it. This was the story. But it was more than that. As she stood in that room where 7 people had died violently, she felt something shift in the air around her. A presence, a watching. The sensation of being on the edge of understanding something vast and terrible. "Sarah, you okay?" Jamie's hand on her shoulder made her jump. "Yeah, sorry, it's just intense. Tell me about it." He was staring at the stains, too, his usual sarcastic demeanor stripped away. "I've worked on a lot of old buildings, houses where people died, even places where murders happened. But I've never felt anything like this. It's like the air is heavy, you know? Like the house is holding its breath. Marcus checked his watch. It's almost 5. I need to get back to the hospital, check on my daughter. But I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9. We can continue the walkthrough then. He looked at them both seriously. I know I hired you, Jamie, and I can't stop you from being here, Sarah, but I'm asking you both, don't come here alone. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. After Marcus left, Sarah and Jamie stood in the entrance hall, the silence of the house pressing down on them like a physical weight. You're going to come back alone, aren't you? Jam, I said. Sarah turned to him, surprised. What makes you say that? Because you've got that look. The look people get when they're obsessed with something. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror every morning. He ran a hand through his damp curls. You want to know why I really took this job? It wasn't just the money, though God knows I need it. It's because my sister disappeared 23 years ago. She was working as a maid here, one of the few people Richard Whitmore still employed to keep the place from falling apart completely. One day she just vanished. Never found, never explained. I was 4 years old. Sarah felt her chest tighten. I'm so sorry. The thing is, the night before she disappeared, she called my mom, said she'd found something in the house, something that explained everything about the murders, about Victoria Whitmore, about all of it. She was going to bring proof the next day, and then she was gone. Jamie's eyes were wet. So yeah, I'm here for my sister, to find out what happened to her, to finally put that ghost to rest. My grandmother worked here too, Sarah heard herself say. Early 80s, right before the murders. She never talked about it, but on her deathbed, she told me the truth was still here, that someone needed to find it. She looked up at the damaged portraits, the staring eyes. I think our reasons for being here are connected somehow. Maybe. Jamie pulled out his phone, frowned at it. No signal, of course. Look, I'm staying in town at the Ashford Inn. You? Same place. How about we grab dinner? Compare notes? And maybe tomorrow we come back together, break Marcus's rule about not going in alone, but at least we'll have each other's backs. Sarah knew she should say no, should maintain professional boundaries. But standing in this house, feeling the weight of its secrets pressing down on her, the idea of having an ally was too appealing to resist. Dinner sounds good. As they locked up and walked back to their cars through the now lightning rain, Sarah turned for one last look at the mansion. In the third-floor corner window, she could have sworn she saw a figure standing there, watching them leave, a woman in a white dress with dark hair. But when she blinked, the window was empty, just another dark square in a house full of darkness. That night, Sarah sat in her hotel room surrounded by printouts and notes, trying to piece together the puzzle. The official story was clear enough. Victoria Whitmore had a psychotic break and murdered 7 people. But the details didn't add up. The locked doors, the damaged portraits, the witnesses who swore they heard Victoria screaming for help even as she held the razor. The fact that she kept saying it wasn't me right up until her death. Sarah's grandmother's journal was open on the bed. She'd found it when cleaning out the house after the funeral, a small leather-bound book her grandmother had hidden in a shoebox in her closet. Most of it was mundane, daily observations from the early 1980s, but there were a few entries from her time at the Whitmore estate that Sarah had read so many times she'd nearly memorized them. March 15, 1983. Mrs. Whitmore asked me to clean the 3rd floor today. I don't like going up there. The portraits watch you differently. There's a room at the end of the hall that's always locked. When I tee my ear to the door, I swear I can hear whispering. July 4, 1983. Found Mrs. Whitmore crying in the library today. When I asked what was wrong, she said the house was talking to her, telling her things about her family, about the past. I wanted to tell Mr. Whitmore, but she begged me not to, said he'd think she was crazy. Maybe she is, or maybe I'm crazy too because sometimes I hear it. The whispering. October 28, 1983. I can't work here anymore. Something is wrong with this place. Yesterday I saw one of the portraits move. I know how that sounds, but I saw it. The eyes followed me across the room, and the locked room on the 3rd floor. The door was open today just for a moment. I looked inside. I wish I hadn't. I'm giving my notice tomorrow. Mrs. Whitmore tried to convince me to stay, said she needs someone who understands. But I can't. I won't. Some doors are locked for a reason. The entry ended there. Her grandmother had left the Whitmore estate on October 30, 1983. The murders happened exactly 1 year later, on October 30, 1984. Sarah's phone rang, making her jump. It was Jamie. "Hey, you still up?" He sounded tense. "Yeah, research. What's wrong?" "I've been going through my sister's things. My mom kept everything. Her clothes, her diary, her phone records. I found something. The last call she made before she disappeared wasn't to my mom. It was to someone at the Ashford Historical Society, a woman named Margaret Green. I just looked her up. She's still alive, still in Ashford. Runs a bookshop on Main Street." Sarah's pulse quickened. The Historical Society president who had the stroke was named Robert Green, Margaret's husband. He had the stroke while trying to investigate the Whitmore estate in 2007. Been in a nursing home ever since. Can't speak, can barely move. Jamie's voice was shaking. "Sarah, what if my sister found something? What if she told Margaret Green, and Margaret sent her husband to verify it, and whatever he found, what if that's what destroyed him? We need to talk to Margaret. Tomorrow morning, first thing, before we go back to the house." He paused. "Sarah, be careful tonight. Lock your door. I know it sounds paranoid, but I already locked it. Triple-checked." After they hung up, Sarah tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept thinking about Victoria Whitmore, about a kind woman who'd become a killer overnight, about all the people who'd tried to uncover the truth about that house and had ended up dead, missing, or destroyed, about her grandmother's warning and Jamie's sister's disappearance and Marcus's dying daughter. Somewhere around 3 a.m., she finally drifted off, and when she did, she dreamed of the mansion. But in her dream, it was alive and whole, lit up for a party. She walked through rooms filled with people in elaborate costumes, all dancing and laughing, none of them aware that midnight was coming. She climbed the grand staircase, drawn by something she couldn't name, and walked down the third-floor corridor to the locked room her grandmother had mentioned. The door stood open. Inside was a mirror, floor-to-ceiling, ornately framed. But the reflection it showed wasn't Sarah. It was Victoria Whitmore, young and beautiful and terrified, holding up her hands as if to ward something off. As Sarah watched, Victoria's reflection began to change. Her face twisted, her eyes went black, and her mouth opened impossibly wide in a scream that Sarah felt rather than heard. Then the reflection moved on its own, independent of Victoria. It reached out toward Sarah. Through the glass, fingers like ice closing around her wrist. She woke gasping, her heart hammering. The digital clock read 4:44 a.m. Her wrist ached where Dream Victoria had grabbed her, and when she turned on the light and looked, there were faint red marks there, like fingerprints. That was impossible. It had been a dream, just a dream. But Sarah knew, with a certainty that lived in her bones, that whatever was in the Whitmore Mansion was already reaching out to them. And tomorrow, when they went back, it would be waiting. The truth in the walls. The Ashford book nook was wedged between a hardware store and a closed-down pharmacy on Main Street, the kind of independent bookstore that smelled like old paper and possibility. Sarah and Jamie found Margaret Green behind the counter, a woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that held a deep wariness. She looked up as they entered, and something flickered across her face, recognition or fear. Sarah couldn't tell which. "We're closed," Margaret said, even though the sign on the door clearly read open. "Mrs. Green, my name is Sarah Chen. This is Jamie Ortega. We need to talk to you about the Whitmore estate." The book Margaret had been holding slipped from her fingers and hit the counter with a thud that seemed too loud in the small space. "I don't talk about that place. Not anymore. Not ever." Jamie stepped forward. "Your husband tried to investigate the mansion in 2007. My sister, Rosa Ortega, called you in 2001, the day before she disappeared. She worked at the estate. She told you she'd found something." Margaret's face had gone pale. She reached for the counter as if she needed support. "You're Rosa's little brother? Oh my God, you look like her." Her eyes filled with tears. "I told her not to go back. I begged her. But she said people needed to know the truth, and then she was gone, and She sank onto a stool behind the counter. "I should close up. We can't talk about this here." 10 minutes later, they were in Margaret's apartment above the bookstore, sitting in a living room cluttered with books and photographs. On the mantel was a picture of a younger Margaret with a tall, scholarly-looking man. Robert, Sarah assumed. Margaret made tea with shaking hands and finally sat down across from them. My husband spent 20 years researching the Whitmore family, she began. It started as a historical interest. The Whitmores were one of the founding families of Ashford, built their fortune in shipping and textiles in the 1800s. But the more Robert dug, the more he found. Inconsistencies. Patterns. What kind of patterns? Sarah had her notebook out, but her hand with the faint red marks was trembling slightly. Deaths. Disappearances. Madness. Going back generations. The Whitmore men seemed normal enough, but the women... Margaret's voice dropped. Every Whitmore bride for the last 150 years either died young, went insane, or vanished. Victoria wasn't the first, she was just the most dramatic. Jamie leaned forward. What did my sister find? She found the records. The real records, hidden in the third-floor room. The the family kept locked. Margaret got up and went to a filing cabinet, pulled out a thick folder with shaking hands. After Rosa disappeared, after I sent Robert to investigate, and after what happened to him, I was left with this. The copies Rosa made before she vanished. I've kept them for 23 years, too afraid to show anyone. Too afraid to destroy them. She spread the contents across the coffee table. Sarah and Jamie leaned in, and what they saw made Sarah's blood run cold. They were letters, dozens of them, spanning from 1871 to 1983, all written by Whitmore brides, all describing the same things. Whispers in the walls, portraits that watched, a presence that grew stronger the longer you stayed in the house. And at the center of it all, the locked room on the third floor, and the mirror it contained. The mirror, Sarah breathed. Her dream, the impossible dream that had left real marks on her wrist. According to these letters, Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper, the mirror was brought from France by Charles Whitmore in 1871. It was supposed to be a gift for his new bride, Elizabeth. The story goes that it was crafted by a family of mirror makers who practiced dark arts, who knew how to trap things in glass. Elizabeth wrote about it obsessively, how beautiful it was, how it showed her things, the past, the future, things that couldn't be real, and then how it started to change her. Jamie was reading one of the letters, his face pale. This one is from 1923. Margaret Whitmore, different Margaret. She writes about seeing something in the mirror. A figure, a woman who wasn't a reflection, who moved independently, who whispered and struck. Sean's. They all mention the whispers, Margaret said. The mirror shows you things, tells you things, family secrets, hidden truths, and the more you look, the more it pulls you in. Elizabeth Whitmore threw herself down the stairs in 1875. Margaret Whitmore drowned herself in the bathtub in 1925. Catherine Whitmore walked into the woods in 1956 and was never found. The pattern repeats over and over. Sarah was reading Victoria's letters now, dated from 1980 to 1984. The progression was chilling. At first, Victoria wrote about the mirror with curiosity, even delight. It showed her memories she'd forgotten, moments from her childhood. But then the entries grew darker. The mirror started showing her things she didn't want to see, her husband's affairs, her children's resentments, the servants gossiping about her. And then it started showing her the past, Sarah read aloud. October 1st, 1984. The mirror showed me something terrible today. It showed me what really happened to all those other Whitmore brides. It showed me the thing that lives in the glass. It's not a reflection. It's something that was trapped there by those French mirror makers over 150 years ago. A woman who was accused of witchcraft and burned alive. Her last words were a curse, that she would never truly die, that she would live forever in reflection, and that every proud family who looked upon her would know her suffering. The Whitmores bought a cursed mirror and built their whole mansion around it, and now it owns them. It owns all of us who live here. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an old clock. Victoria tried to destroy it, Margaret continued. That's what the Halloween party was really about. She invited everyone, all of society, as witnesses. She was going to expose the mirror, show everyone what it was, and then smash it. Free the thing trapped inside or destroy it, whatever it took. But the mirror... She struggled for words. The mirror fought back. It possessed her, Jamie said flatly. Made her kill those people, or the witnesses were the problem, Sarah said slowly, pieces falling into place in her mind. Victoria said every door was locked from the inside. What if that's because it wasn't Victoria who locked them? What if the entity in the mirror locked everyone else out and everyone who was supposed to witness the truth inside? And then it made Victoria kill them. A perfect punishment. She wanted to free people from its curse, and instead she became its most notorious victim. Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. That's what Robert concluded. That's what he was going to prove. He went to the mansion with equipment, cameras, recording devices, everything. He was only going to document the mirror, show what it could do, bring it into the light. But he was in there for less than an hour before. She couldn't finish. "What happened to him?" Sarah asked gently. They found him in the third-floor room, sitting in front of the mirror, catatonic. He'd had a massive stroke. But before he collapsed, he'd taken video. "I have it. I've never been able to watch the whole thing." She got up again, pulled out an old laptop from a drawer. "Maybe you need to see it. Maybe that's the only way to make you understand what you're dealing with." She opened a video file, and the screen filled with shaky footage of a sty hallway. Robert's breathing was audible, quick and nervous. The camera moved down the third-floor corridor of the Whitmore Mansion, past damaged portraits, until it reached a door at the end. The door that had been locked for decades. It stood open. Robert's whispered voice came through the speakers. "The door's open. I didn't touch it. I came up here and it was just open." The camera moved through the doorway. The room beyond was small, almost a closet, with no furniture except for a single mirror standing against the far wall. Even through the poor quality of the video, the mirror was stunning, nearly 8 feet tall, framed in dark wood carved with intricate designs that might have been vines or snakes. Robert moved closer. "It's beautiful. The craftsmanship is incredible. I'm just going to document the carvings and then—" He stopped. The camera went still. In the reflection, Sarah could see Robert's face, but there was something wrong with it. The reflection wasn't quite matching his movements. "That's impossible," Robert's voice said. There's someone behind me." But when the camera swung around, the room was empty. When it turned back to the mirror, there was definitely a figure behind Robert's reflection. A woman in old-fashioned dress, her face obscured by shadow. "Who are you?" Robert asked. "What do you want?" The reflection woman moved closer. And then she smiled, and when she did, her mouth was too wide, full of too many teeth, and Robert began to scream. The camera fell, showing just the ceiling and the sound of Robert's screams fading into silence. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching the fallen camera. A woman's hand, ached down, pale, impossibly long fingers, and the screen went black. The three of them sat in silence for a long moment. Sarah felt sick. Jamie had his head in his hands. "Your sister saw that mirror," Margaret said to Jamie. "She made those copies and she was going to expose everything. But she went back to get more evidence and she never came out." "She's dead then," Jamie said hollowly. "That thing killed her, or took her." Margaret's voice was barely audible. "Some of the letters talk about the mirror taking people, pulling them through, trapping them on the other side." Sarah thought about her dream, about Victoria reaching through the glass, about the marks on her wrist that were still there, that shouldn't be there. "We have to destroy it. That's the only way to end this. 40 years of people suffering, dying, disappearing. It has to stop. You can't destroy it," Margaret said urgently. "Don't you understand? Everyone who's tried has either died or ended up like Robert. That thing in the mirror, it's been trapped for over 150 years. It's had all that time to grow stronger, to learn how to defend itself. You can't fight it. We have to try," Jamie said. He looked at Sarah. "For my sister, for your grandmother, for Victoria and all the others. Someone has to end this." "But how?" Sarah asked. "If we can't destroy the mirror, if going near it is basically suicide." "We research," Jamie said firmly. "We find out everything we can about that French family, about the woman who was burned, about how the mirror was made. There has to be a weakness. There has to be a way." Margaret looked between them, and Sarah saw fear warring with hope into the old woman's eyes. "If you're really going to do this, there's something else you need to know. The anniversary is coming up. October 30th. That's in 6 weeks. Every major incident connected to that house has happened on October 30th. It's like that date has power. Like the barrier between this world and whatever's trapped in that mirror gets thinner. 6 weeks to figure out how to destroy a cursed mirror and save ourselves from a vengeful spirit, Jamie said. No pressure. They left Margaret's apartment with a folder of letters and a list of contacts, historians, occult researchers, anyone who might be able to help. Sarah's mind was racing with possibilities and dead ends. They needed a plan, needed to be smart about this, needed to... Her phone rang. Marcus? Sarah? Thank God, I've been trying to reach you. Something's happened at the house. Her stomach dropped. What kind of something? The alarm system I had installed yesterday, it went off early this morning. The police checked it out and said it was probably just an animal, but... He paused. The third-floor door. The locked room. It's open, and there are footprints in the dust, fresh footprints, leading to and from the mirror. Sarah exchanged a look with Jamie. We're on our way. The drive to the Whitmore estate felt different in daylight, though not safer. The mansion loomed against a clear blue sky, looking less like a haunted house and more like a wounded monument to past grandeur. The police had already left by the time Sarah and Jamie arrived, and Marcus was waiting by the front steps, looking like he hadn't slept. I told them not to go up there, he said as they approached. The officers, they insisted on checking it out. They were up there for maybe 5 minutes. When they came down, they were pale and shaking and said it was all clear. But I saw their hands trembling. I saw the look in their eyes. They saw something. Marcus, Sarah said carefully, how much do you know about the mirror? His laugh was bitter. The family curse, the haunted looking glass? Oh, I know all about it. Every Whitmore kid grows up hearing whispers about it. Most of us dismissed it as legend. But my great-uncle Richard, before he stopped talking, he wrote me a letter. I got it after he died. He said the mirror killed Victoria. Said it killed his whole life. Said I should burn the house down and salt the earth and never let anyone near it. I didn't believe him. I thought grief and age had made him paranoid. He looked up at the mansion. I don't think that anymore. They went inside together, moving through the familiar path to the grand staircase. Sarah's hand kept straying to her wrist, to the marks that hadn't faded. She could feel the house around her, feel its attention like a physical weight. It knew they were there. It was waiting. The third floor was worse than she'd imagined. The portraits here were even more damaged, some slashed so viciously the canvas hung in ribbons. The floorboards creaked under their feet, and the air felt thick, hard to breathe. At the end of the hall, the door stood open, just as Margaret's video had shown, just as Marcus had described. I'm going in, Sarah said. Jamie grabbed her arm. Like hell you are. Not alone. We don't split up, remember? He's right, Marcus said. Whatever's in there, we face it together. They approached the doorway as a unit, and Sarah felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The room beyond was exactly as the video had shown, small, bare except for the mirror, but seeing it in person was different. The mirror was magnificent and terrible, and she could feel its pull immediately. It wanted her to look, wanted her to see. Don't look directly at it, Jamie said, his voice tight. Margaret said that's how it gets you, through the reflection, but Marcus was already moving forward, transfixed. Oh my God, it's real, it's all real. Marcus, don't, Sarah started to say, but he was already standing before the mirror, staring into its depths. I can see her, he whispered. I can see Victoria. She's in there, Sarah. She's trapped in there, and she's not alone. There are so many of them. All the Whitmore brides, all the victims, they're all... His voice cut off with a choking sound. His eyes went wide, and Sarah saw blood begin to trickle from his nose. Marcus! Jamie lunged forward, grabbed him, tried to pull him away from the mirror. But Marcus was frozen, locked in place by whatever he was seeing. The blood was flowing freely now, from his nose, his ears. Sarah didn't think. She moved on instinct, putting herself between Marcus and the mirror, breaking the line of sight. Let him go. Whatever you are, let him go. The temperature in the room dropped so fast her breath became visible. And then she heard it. The whispers her grandmother had written about. The whispers Victoria had described. They surrounded her, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Female voices speaking in languages she didn't know but somehow understood. Look at us. Say, what was done. See what we've become. Against every instinct of self-preservation, Sarah looked at the mirror. The reflection that looked back wasn't hers alone. Standing behind her was a woman in Victorian dress, young and beautiful and rotting all at once, her face shifting between wholeness and decay. Victoria Whitmore. But she wasn't alone. There were others crowding behind her, women in dresses from different eras, all with the same haunted, hungry eyes. And in the center of them all, the thing that had once been a woman but was now something else entirely, the original victim, the witch who'd been burned and trapped. Her face was a nightmare of scar tissue and rage, her mouth a perpetual scream. But her eyes held a terrible awareness, a suffering so profound it made Sarah's soul ache. "You came," the thing said, and its voice was all the whispers at once. Finally, someone who might understand. Understand what? Sarah forced the words out through chattering teeth. That we are all victims, that we are all prisoners. The mirror traps us, yes, but we are not what you think. We do not kill, we do not harm. We warn. We try to warn. The face that had been Victoria pressed close to the glass. "I didn't kill those people. The mirror did. It feeds on death, on suffering, on fear. It makes us watch, makes us participate, and then it uses our images to attract others. Don't you see? We're bait. We're the lure for the trap." "Then how do we stop it?" Sarah asked. The spirits in the mirror swirled, agitated. "The mirror cannot be destroyed by force. We've seen them all try, the brave ones who thought violence would work. It drinks their life force and grows stronger. The only way is the way it was made, with intention, with purpose, with sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Victoria's reflection reached out, pressed her palm against the glass. Sarah saw her own hand moving, mimicking the gesture, and suddenly their palms were touching through the barrier. And Sarah felt Victoria's memories flooding into her mind. She saw the Halloween party, saw Victoria gathering the 7 people closest to her, her sister, her best friend, the servants who'd been loyal for years. Saw her confessing the truth about the mirror, saw them agreeing to help her, saw them standing in the ballroom in a circle, hands joined, chanting words Victoria had found in an old grimoire, words that should have broken the curse. But the mirror had been too strong. It had reached out with invisible fingers and squeezed, and the 7 had died instantly, their souls ripped away before the ritual could finish. And Victoria, at the center of the circle, had been forced to watch. The mirror had then animated her body like a puppet, made her pick up the razor, made her complete the horror, while she screamed silently inside her own head. The ritual almost worked. Victoria's voice echoed in Sarah's mind. It would have worked if there'd been more of us, if the sacrifice had been willing, if the intention had been pure. But the mirror learned from it. It knows the threat now. It won't let you try the same thing. Sarah pulled her hand back, gasping. Behind her, she heard Jamie struggling with Marcus, heard Marcus moaning. But she couldn't look away from the mirror, from Victoria's pleading eyes. "There has to be another way." "There is," said the burned woe. "Man, the original victim. Free me. Not from the mirror. I've been here too long. I am the mirror now. But free me from the purpose I was trapped for. The mirror makers bound me because I cursed them, cursed their family, and they wanted revenge. They wanted me to suffer forever, to watch others suffer, to be a tool of torment. Break that binding, and the mirror loses its power. How do we break a binding that's over 150 years old? Find my name. My real name, not the name they called me when they burned me. Find my true name and speak it 3 times before the mirror on the anniversary of my death." That's the key the mirror makers never anticipated, that someone might care enough to learn who I really was. The image in the mirror began to waver, the spirits fading. Sarah felt the connection weakening. "Wait, when did you die? What else can you tell me?" "October 30th, 1870, the town of Beauvais in France. Find my name, free us all." The mirror went still, showing only Sarah's reflection and the small room behind her. The whispers cut off abruptly. The temperature returned to normal. Sarah turned to find Jamie supporting Marcus, who was conscious but barely, blood still leaking from his nose. "We need to get him to a hospital," Jamie said. "Now." They half-carried Marcus down the stairs and out to his car as Jamie drove them to Ashford General. Sarah sat in the back with Marcus holding his hand, feeling his pulse flutter weak and uncertain. "Did you see them?" Marcus whispered. "All those women. I saw them. My daughter is going to die if I don't sell this house. But I can't sell this house knowing what it is, knowing what it will do to whoever buys it." Tears leaked from his closed eyes. "There's no way out. There's never been a way out for the Whitmores." "There is now," Sarah said with a certainty she didn't quite feel. "We're going to end this. I promise you." At the hospital, they lied and said Marcus had had a fall at the estate, hit his head. The doctors ran tests, kept him for observation. Sarah and Jamie sat in the waiting room, both of them shaking with delayed shock and adrenaline. "You talk to it," Jamie said finally. "You talk to the thing in the mirror, Victoria, and the others, and the original woman who was trapped." Sarah pulled out her phone, started searching. October 30th, 1870, Beauvais, France, witch burning. There has to be a record. There has to be something. She searched for hours while Jamie dozed in the uncomfortable waiting room chair. She found references to witch trials in that region, found stories about the mirror-making families of France, found tantalizing mentions of dark practices and forbidden arts, but nothing specific, nothing about a woman burned on that exact date. Finally, around midnight, a nurse came to tell them Marcus was stable and sleeping. They should go home, get rest, come back in the morning. Sarah and Jamie stumbled out into the parking lot, exhausted and discouraged. "We're not going to find it online," Jamie said. "We need to go there, to France, to Beauvais. If there are records, they'll be in local archives, church documents, things that were never digitized. That's thousands of dollars, plane tickets, accommodations, research fees. I'm a broke documentary filmmaker. I can." Jamie's voice was quiet. "I have money saved for my sister's funeral, when we finally found her body. I've been putting away a little every month for 23 years, knowing someday I'd need it. Well, this is what I need it for." He looked at her. "We go to France, we find the name, we come back and we break the curse. And maybe, just maybe, we find out what really happened to Rosa." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to save his money, wanted to find another way, but there was no other way. There were 6 weeks until October 30th, 6 weeks to find a name that had been lost for over a century. "Okay," she said, "we go to France." They flew out 3 days later, after Marcus was released from the hospital with strict orders to rest. He'd made them promise to call him with updates, and when Sarah told him their plan, he'd grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "Find her name," he'd said. "Save them, save all of them. And Sarah, if something happens to me before you get back, if this thing decides I'm a liability, tell my daughter I loved her. Tell her I tried." Now Sarah sat on a plane crossing the Atlantic, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Jamie was next to her, reading through copies of the letters they'd gotten from Margaret, looking for any clues they might have missed. Around them, ordinary people slept or watched movies or complained about the airline food, completely unaware that somewhere in Connecticut, a cursed mirror was waiting for them to fail. Sarah pulled out her grandmother's journal again, reading the entries she'd nearly memorized. Her grandmother had known something was wrong with that house, had felt the mirror's pull, had escaped with her sanity intact, but the knoll edge of what she'd left behind had haunted her for the rest of her life. "I won't leave it behind," Sarah whispered to the memory of her grandmother. "I'll finish what Victoria started, I promise." Beauvais was a small city north of Paris, beautiful in that timeless French way, with narrow streets and old buildings and churches that had stood for centuries. Sarah and Jamie checked into a modest hotel and immediately went to work. The local library, the town historical society, the Catholic church records. They searched everywhere for mentions of witch trials, executions, burnings. For 3 days they found nothing. The frustration was crushing. Sarah dreamed of the mirror every night, dreamed of Victoria and the others trapped behind the glass, their hope fading as the anniversary drew closer. Sometimes she woke with new marks on her skin, scratches, bruises, once a burn mark in the perfect shape of a hand. The mirror was reaching out even here, reminding her that time was running short. On the 4th day, they met Father Michel at the Cathedral of Saint-Pierre. He was an elderly priest with kind eyes who spoke excellent English and listened to their story with a skepticism that gradually transformed into something like belief. October 30th, 1870, he mused, leading them down into the cathedral's archive. During the Franco-Prussian War, it was a time of chaos, fear, people looking for scapegoats. Yes, there were accusations of witchcraft, though the practice of burning witches was officially ended long before that. He pulled out a large, leather-bound ledger, but unofficial practices, those continued, especially in smaller towns, villages. The church tried to stop it, but he shrugged in that particularly Gallic way. Fear makes people cruel. He opened the ledger, turned pages with careful, practiced hands, and then he stopped, his finger tracing a line of faded ink. Here, a record of a burial, or rather, a notation that burial rites were refused, for a woman named Marguerite Beaumont died October 30th, 1870, by fire. The priest who recorded it noted that she was accused of placing curses and was executed by the townspeople despite the church's objections. He wrote that he prayed for her soul, even though he could not give her proper burial. Marguerite Beaumont, Sarah breathed. Could it really be that simple? Father Michel continued reading. There is something else, a note that her body was claimed by her cousin, Pierre Beaumont, who was a mirror maker in the town. Pierre was... this is interesting. Pierre was investigated by the church for heretical practices in 1872. He claimed he could trap souls in glass, that he could create mirrors that showed truth, that he had bound the spirit of his cousin to prevent her curse from destroying his family. He trapped her on purpose, Jamie said, stunned. Not as punishment, as protection. But it didn't work, Sarah said, pieces falling together in her mind. Marguerite's curse was that she would make others suffer as she suffered. Pierre thought he could contain it by trapping her in the mirror, but all he did was create a tool for her suffering to spread. Every person who looked into that mirror, every family who bought it, they all became part of the curse. Father Michel closed the ledger gently. Marguerite Beaumont. I will pray that speaking her name brings her peace. And you. He looked at them seriously. You should pray too. What you are attempting is dangerous. The boundary between our world and the world of spirits is real and must be respected. They thanked him and left with the name written on a piece of paper that felt like it was burning a hole in Sarah's pocket. Marguerite Beaumont, a woman who'd been murdered by a fearful mob and then imprisoned by her own family to protect themselves from her righteous anger. How many layers of tragedy could one story hold? They flew back to Connecticut with 10 days to spare before October 30th. On the plane, Sarah finally slept without nightmares. When she woke, the marks on her skin had faded to nothing. It felt like a sign. But when they landed and turned on their phones, there were 17 missed calls from Marcus. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she listened to the voicemail. Sarah, it's Marcus. Something's wrong. The house, people keep showing up there. They don't know why. They just feel pulled. 3 people so far have tried to break in. Police had to remove them. It's like the mirror knows what you're doing. It's calling for help, for victims, for power. We need to move fast. We need to end this now. Call me. They drove straight to Ashford, not even stopping at their hotel. On the way, they called Margaret Green and filled her in. She listened in silence, and when they finished, she said, I'm coming with you. To the house. On the 30th. Robert can't help, but I can. I should have done this years ago. I owe it to your sister, Jamie. I owe it to all of them. It could kill you, Sarah said bluntly. I'm 74 years old with arthritis and a weak heart. I've lived in fear of that house for 2 decades. If I die helping to destroy it, that's a better death than wasting away in my apartment too afraid to even drive past the property. I'm coming. Marcus said essentially the same thing when they met him at his office. He looked terrible, drawn and pale, having clearly lost weight. My daughter's treatments aren't working as well as we hoped. The doctors say she has maybe 4 months. The house sale is the only way I can afford the next round of experimental treatment, but I can't sell it like this, and even if I could, I won't condemn someone else to that curse. So we end it. On the 30th, whatever it takes. And so, on October 29th, the 4 of them met to plan. Sarah had researched the ritual Victoria had attempted, had consulted with experts in folklore and occult practices, had pieced together a framework they hoped would work. It required a circle of participants, willingly joined. It required the true name to be spoken 3 times, and it required a sacrifice, not of life, but of connection. Each person in the circle would have to offer up their strongest tie to the mirror's curse, their pain, their loss, their grief, the things that had brought them to this point. For me, it's Victoria, Marcus said. The guilt of being her family, of profiting from the name while she and all the others suffered. I offer that guilt. I release it. For me, it's Robert, Margaret said quietly. The love I still have for him, even though he's gone in every way that matters. The hope that somehow this might bring him peace. I offer that. Jamie's voice was rough. Rosa, my sister. I offer the grief I've carried for 23 years. The hole in my family that never healed. I offer it to free her, wherever she is. They all turned to Sarah. My grandmother, she said. The promises I made her, the need to make her proud, to finish what she couldn't. I offer that. And I offer... She paused, surprised by what she was about to say. I offer my need to always find the truth, the thing that drives me, that's driven me my whole life. If that's what it takes to end this, I'll give it up. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her hotel bed, watching the hours tick toward midnight, toward October 30th, toward either freedom or destruction for them all. Around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. Can't sleep either. Want to get coffee? They met in the hotel lobby and walked to an all-night diner, not talking, just being present with each other. Over terrible coffee and surprisingly good pie, Jamie finally spoke. I'm terrified, he said. I've spent my whole life being angry about Rosa, being driven by this need to know what happened, and tomorrow I might actually find out, and I'm terrified the answer will be worse than not knowing. I know, Sarah said, but we're doing this for them, for Rosa and all the others. They've been trapped long enough. What if it doesn't work? What if we just end up as more reflections in that mirror? Then at least we'll be together. All of us who tried. We won't be alone. It wasn't particularly comforting, but it was true. They finished their coffee and walked back to the hotel as dawn began to break. October 30th had arrived. They gathered at the Whitmore estate at sunset. Marcus had arranged for the police to block off the road, told them they were doing a private ceremony for his family, which wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah set up cameras to document what happened, though she had no idea if the footage would survive what they were about to attempt. The house seemed to loom larger than usual as they approached, its windows gleaming like eyes in the dying light. Sarah could feel the mirror's awareness from here, could sense its anticipation. It knew they were coming. It was ready. They entered together, climbed the stairs together, walked the third-floor hallway together. The door to the mirror room stood open, as it had for weeks now. The mirror gleamed in the gathering darkness, and Sarah could see faces in it already. Victoria and the others, pressed against the glass, watching with hope and fear. They formed a circle in front of the mirror, joining hands. Sarah had the ritual words written on a paper in her pocket, but she'd memorized them days ago. Victoria's ritual, modified with what they'd learned, with the name they'd found, with the offerings they were prepared to make. We stand before this mirror, Sarah began, her voice shaking but clear. Not to destroy, but to free. We call upon Marguerite Beaumont, who was wronged by the living and wronged by the dead. Marguerite Beaumont, hear your true name. Marguerite Beaumont, remember who you were before the fire, before the curse, before the mirror. The temperature dropped. The mirror's surface began to ripple like water. We offer our pain, Marcus said, the guilt of generations. Take it and release it. We offer our love, Margaret said, the devotion that binds us to ghosts. Take it and transform it. We offer our grief, Jamie said, his voice breaking, the loss that has defined us. Take it and heal it. We offer our purpose, Sarah finished, the driving need that brought us here. Take it and let it be enough. The mirror exploded with light. Sarah heard screaming, from the mirror, from her companions, from herself. She felt something ripping out of her chest, something precious and integral, and she almost let go, almost broke the circle. But Marcus's hand tightened on hers, and Margaret's fingers gripped hard, and Jamie's palm was sweaty but steady, and together they held on. In the mirror they could see her now, Marguerite Beaumont as she had been. Not the burned monster, not the screaming victim, but a woman. Just a woman who had been afraid and angry, and who had cursed in her final moments because that was all the power she had left. Marguerite Beaumont, they said together 3 times, as the ritual required. Marguerite Beaumont. Marguerite Beaumont. On the third repetition, the mirror cracked. A single line ran from top to bottom, and through that crack something began to pour out. Not evil, not malice, just release. Sarah felt it wash over her like a wave. All the stored-up suffering of 150 years, all the trapped souls finding their way out, all the pain finally being acknowledged and set free. Victoria appeared before them, no longer a reflection but a presence, translucent and fading. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing us, for caring enough to end it." Behind her, the other Whitmore brides appeared, and servants, and victims of the Halloween massacre. And at the center of them all, Marguerite herself, the burn, arcs fading from her face, leaving behind the woman she'd been. "I'm sorry," Marguerite said, and she was crying. "I was so angry. I wanted them to suffer as I suffered. But I became the thing I hated. I became the monster they said I was." "You were hurt," Sarah said. "You have a right to be angry, but you also have a right to rest now. You all do." One by one, the spirits began to fade. Some smiled as they went. Others just looked relieved. Victoria was one of the last to go, and as she disappeared, she pressed her hand to the glass one final time, and Sarah felt that touch like a benediction. And then, with a sound like a sig,